My parents don't visit me after my accident, but they go to my brother's ceremony at his work. Now they come to the hospital and ask me to pay his bail for corporate fraud. I'm 26 years old. About 3 weeks ago, I had a really bad car accident. My car was hit from the side while I was returning home from work, and the impact was so strong that the car overturned. I don't remember much after the accident, only when they were taking me by ambulance to the hospital. I ended up with a fractured leg, two broken ribs, and bleeding that required emergency surgery. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, recovering from surgery and trying to process everything that had happened. Obviously, being in the hospital was hard, both physically and emotionally. From the moment I woke up, all I wanted was for my parents to come visit me. I thought they would come running as soon as they knew I had been in an accident. I didn't expect them to stay the whole time or anything, but even a visit would have meant the world to me. Instead, they didn't show up for days. I stood there waiting, hoping they would come, or at least call, but nothing. I think it was 4 days in the hospital before I even received a text message from them. Before anyone asks if my parents were informed about what happened to me, yes, they were. They are my emergency contacts, and the hospital told me they had tried to contact them several times. They finally managed to reach my parents a day after I was admitted, but apparently, they were indifferent to everything. Luckily, my belongings survived the accident, so I still had my phone with me. They could have texted me at least. Every day was basically a nightmare, and I just wanted to see someone familiar. I did everything possible to justify my parents not coming to visit me, but it became more difficult with each passing hour, without them contacting me. Fortunately, my friends visited me, but they also have their lives and couldn't be with me all the time. On the 6th day, some family members who live nearby finally came to visit. That was the first time someone from my family showed up. I think it was that same day when a family friend visited me and casually mentioned how wonderful it was that my brother was being recognized at an awards ceremony for his work. I had no idea what he was talking about and seemed confused that I didn't know, but he filled me in on what was going on. It turns out my parents had attended my brother's awards ceremony instead of coming to see me. They knew I was in the hospital but chose to be there for my brother and not for me. Before someone criticizes me for being jealous of my brother, it's not about that. But if you have time to go to my brother's award ceremony and not to visit me, not even for 5 minutes, it hurts. I know my brother is talented and has worked hard to get everything he has, but that still doesn't excuse my parents. I'm not stupid. I know he has always been their favorite. Now, he is successful, working for a big company, and this award was something very important to him. But I was literally recovering from surgery. The least they could have done was visit me, or even call to see how I was doing. I wasn't asking for much. I just wanted my parents to show a little concern for me. I could have lost my life that day, and they barely blinked an eye at me. I tried to justify my parents' behavior, but I couldn't because there was no justification. So I decided to contact them and tell them how much it had hurt me. I sent them a text message that basically said I couldn't believe they chose my brother's award over my health. I told them how much it hurt me that they didn't even care about me. For the first time since my accident, I didn't have to wait so long to get a response from them. Honestly, I wish they had never responded, because everything they said only hurt me more. Initially, they tried to justify their actions by saying things like my brother's award was a once-in-a-lifetime achievement and they couldn't miss it, while I was out of danger and wouldn't recover any faster because they were there. Of course, I told them they wouldn't have missed my brother's ceremony at all if they had stopped by to see me a few days earlier. Eventually, they got tired of trying to reason with me and said there was no point in wasting time visiting me. It would be a thing of the past. I can't even explain how much that hurt. It felt like I had fallen and scraped my knees. I wish I could say I was shocked by their actions, but growing up, this is exactly what always happened. Let's move on. A week after my brother's award ceremony, my parents suddenly showed up at the hospital. They arrived with flowers in their hands and faces faker than a Halloween mask. They tried to make small talk about how I was feeling, but it was clear their minds were on something else. I didn't need their sympathy, and I didn't even have to convince them much to tell me what they were thinking because my mom burst into tears pretty quickly. Then she told me that my brother had been arrested for fraud at his company. It turns out the company where my brother worked had discovered that he was committing fraud, and my brother was right in the middle of it all. He had done some questionable things to make a profit for himself. He was caught when one of his coworkers alerted the higher-ups, and after an internal investigation, they turned everything over to the police. He now faces serious charges, including embezzlement, forgery, and wire fraud. Apparently, my parents had already spent a lot of their savings trying to hire lawyers for him. They didn't have enough left to cover his bail, and that's why they came to see me. They knew I had some savings, and they wanted me to use them to get him out on bail. They also asked if I knew anyone who could pull strings or help in some way. It was like I wasn't even their daughter. They just saw me as a resource to clean up my brother's mess. I was lying in bed, and they didn't care about me, but about how I could benefit them and my brother. Why should I get the same brother out of jail who has always had everything handed to him on a silver platter? Besides, this doesn't seem to be a case where he's been falsely accused. Even my parents believe he's being blamed for something he actually did. I told them I wasn't going to help. I said I didn't have the money, and even if I did, I didn't think it was my responsibility to bail him out. Plus, I probably need the money myself since, although my insurance covers some things, it doesn't cover everything. Imagine that I paid for my brother's bail and then found out my hospital bill was bigger than I expected. They wouldn't help me. Honestly, I've spent my whole life being left out in favor of my brother, so the answer was pretty obvious. My parents haven't talked to me since I said no. I know they're mad, but I just can't care anymore. I've spent too much time trying to earn their approval, and I'm fed up. So, am I the bad one for refusing to get my brother out of jail and confronting my parents after everything they have put me through? Update 1. Apart from thanking you for reading my post, I wanted to clarify something because maybe it wasn't clear. I have already left the hospital. I am now at home recovering. As I mentioned, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and it has been 3 weeks since my accident. I thought it was understood that I was at home. Also, it is impossible to write such long posts from a mobile phone. It is much easier to do it from my computer, something I didn't have at the hospital. As for my recovery, I can walk, but I need crutches because of the fracture in my leg. Breathing is still difficult while my ribs heal. Even so, being away from the hospital has been a positive thing because no one wants to spend time there. But my peace of mind vanished shortly after. Sometime after my post, my parents came to visit. As you may know, they no longer came to check on me. They were not angry initially, but told me that I had crossed the line by refusing to help my brother. I don't think I've ever seen them so upset. It was as if they were more angry with me for saying no than for the fact that my brother committed fraud. For them, this was a family issue in which we should support each other. But for them, it wasn't a family issue that I had been in the hospital with serious injuries. I told them this, and they accused me of being vengeful and mean. They also said I was holding a grudge against my brother and using the situation as a way to get back at them. They didn't care that I had almost died a few weeks ago and that I was still recovering. They only cared that I had money to help their son. They weren't even concerned about my medical expenses. They didn't ask about them at all. Everything was so absurd. They basically admitted that I was never part of the family and that the only way to be part of it was by bailing my brother out, which boils down to me having to buy my way into the family. I told them directly that I wouldn't do it, and that's when everything exploded. My mom began crying right there at my door since I hadn't let them in. I was sitting on the porch of my house since I couldn't stand for long, and my parents were standing there saying things like, "You're punishing us for loving him more," and "We've already lost a son, and now we are going to lose two." Well, I think that if I were punishing them for favoring him, it wouldn't be entirely wrong. I suppose my parents didn't get the memo that you're supposed to love your children equally. They lost 2 children because they decided to favor one and disregard the other. Because, let's face it, my dad is a scammer. He wasn't trying to make me feel sorry for him. He just got angrier. He kept saying I would regret it when they were gone, which I find funny because up until now, they didn't seem like they were in my life in any meaningful way. Honestly, it took a lot of effort not to lose control. Not only that, but my parents kept rubbing it in. I eventually got them to leave, but they weren't happy with what I told them. I've gotten a lot of questions about my relationship with my brother, so let me clarify. We weren't close. He's 3 years older than me, so besides the age difference and the fact that we had different tastes, there was the fact that we never got along well. And, well, the fact that he was a bit spoiled by my parents didn't help. I'm not saying he never did anything right, but he didn't always deserve their praise. Even so, they always treated him like he could do no wrong. They acted like his faults were insignificant, while with me, it was the opposite. I could do things right or wrong, but I was always a disappointment. So no, we don't have a great relationship, and I don't see why I should go to the trouble of saving him now. A couple of days after that, my brother's case came out on the news. Apparently, the fraud was much bigger than we thought. The police found evidence that he had been diverting money from the company for over a year. Some of that money had been laundered through fake business accounts in his name. They also discovered that he helped some of his coworkers hide their own stolen money, which means this is all part of a larger investigation. Now my brother is not only facing fraud charges but also money laundering and conspiracy. If he is found guilty, he could face several years in prison. The repercussions of this have been brutal. My parents are in total panic mode. They have spent years bragging about my brother's success to everyone they know, and now it's a little more difficult. One thing was vandalizing the school, which only got him a suspension and a new excuse from my parents. But now we're talking about jail time. They've tried to handle the situation by telling everyone that it's just a misunderstanding and that everything will be resolved, but people don't believe it. My dad even lost an important client because word got around that his son was involved in a major fraud case. And as they say, like father, like son. They're desperate, and it's clear they have no idea what to do. Of course, they crawled back to me again. What a joy. This time, they didn't even try to hide their desperation. They said they were under a lot of stress and needed my help just this once to get through this. They kept saying that if I got my brother out on bail, they would be eternally grateful to me. But I know exactly what that means. To them, making things right means covering up his crimes so that my brother still smells like roses. I told them no again. Now they've gone silent. They don't call and they don't write. Nothing. Honestly, I think they've already given up on me. They probably think I'm a lost cause now, someone who turned their back on the family when they needed me the most. But it's good news because it means they won't bother me anymore. What's more, I think that if the judge finds my brother guilty, they should lock him up along with my parents, since they are indirectly to blame for how he turned out. Update 2. So many have asked how I've been since the accident. I'm better now. I still have to use crutches, but that's okay. Though, with everything that's been going on, I've kind of been distracted from the pain. A few days after my last post, I got an email from my brother. It took me completely by surprise because he's obviously in jail, so he doesn't have access to a phone. It turns out he convinced one of his friends, someone who still believes he's innocent, to email me on his behalf. At first, I was tempted to delete it without reading it. I assumed it was another attempt to make me feel guilty, so I would help him. But curiosity got the better of me, so I opened it. In the email, my brother said that he was being framed. He admitted that things looked bad and that he was indeed involved in the fraud at his company. But he swore it was not his fault and that he wasn't the mastermind behind it all. According to him, he was a scapegoat for other people in the company, his bosses even. He said that some important executives were still free while he was left to carry all the guilt. He begged me to help him, not for our parents, but because he said that I was the only one who could save the family from completely falling apart. I don't know why, but that line really bothered me. Maybe it was because, for the first time, my brother acknowledged how toxic our parents have been. He admitted that they have always treated me unfairly and that they've used him as a tool to inflate their own egos. It was strange to see him admit that because he had always accepted it without question. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was only saying what he thought would convince me to help him. He even used the phrase, "save the family," as a reason for me to bail him out, something my parents have been saying since this whole mess started. Even though I told myself I was done with all this, I couldn't help but wonder if there was some truth to what he was saying. What if he really was being framed? What if this was all bigger than I thought? I guess a part of me just wanted to know the truth. So I decided to investigate. I spoke to a lawyer friend whom I trust and explained the situation. While he couldn't give me a complete legal breakdown because he wasn't involved in the case, he did give me some advice on how to get more information. By digging a little deeper, I found out that my brother's story wasn't completely false. He was involved in fraud. There was no doubt about that. But from what I could gather, he wasn't the one pulling all the strings. Apparently, the fraud scheme was much deeper than just him. Some high-level executives had been diverting company funds for years and used my brother as a pawn. He was in charge of managing certain accounts. So, when everything blew up, all the blame fell on him. These top executives had strategically distanced themselves from the dirty work, and my brother was left as the only one responsible, even though he wasn't the mastermind. Either way, he played a role in a major crime. It's not like he was an innocent bystander who got involved unwittingly. He knew what he was doing and likely thought he'd never get caught. It's clear those executives knew exactly what they were doing and made sure my brother took all the blame if things went wrong. Still, I couldn't help but think about how different things could have been if he hadn't grown up in a family that taught him it was okay to take shortcuts. Despite all this new information, I still couldn't convince myself to help him. At the end of the day, he made his own decisions. He got involved in something illegal, and now he has to deal with the consequences. It's not my responsibility to fix his mistakes, especially after everything I've been through with him and our parents. When I told my parents what I discovered, they were surprisingly quiet. I think a part of them knew, deep down, that my brother wasn't an innocent victim. But they just didn't want to admit it. Instead of acknowledging the truth, they kept pushing the same narrative that I was insensitive for not helping him and selfish for not putting family first. Talking to them was like talking to a wall. At this point, I've decided that I'm not going to get involved with them anymore. I've made my decision, and I'm sticking to it. My brother can blame the executives all he wants, but he still made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. As far as my parents are concerned, if they want to continue helping him, that's their problem. But I don't want them to drag me down with them. My brother's situation is tragic, but it's not my tragedy to fix. Update 3. It's been over a month since my last post, and I finally have enough information to give you an update. Let's start with my parents. They realized that since beginning and calling me names wasn't working, they could do something more to make me feel more miserable than I already was. They decided to badmouth me to the rest of my extended family. They apparently contacted several of my uncles, aunts, and cousins to tell them how selfish and heartless I was for not getting my brother out of jail. They made it seem like I was sitting on a mountain of money and refusing to help out of spite. They basically told everyone I was a monster and couldn't be trusted. At first, it hurt. I felt like I was being punished again, even after standing up for myself. I thought I would end up alone with no one on my side. But instead of siding with my parents, a lot of my relatives preferred to side with me. It turns out my parents have burned bridges with a lot of people over the years, all because of how they've treated others. As always, they prioritized my brother. Well, now they've burned another bridge because if I hadn't planned to help them before, now that they've attacked me, they can say goodbye to that option. As for my brother's case, there is a small update. After I refused to bail him out, my parents eventually gathered enough money by asking for loans and favors to get him out of jail. But the investigation was far from over. A few weeks ago, my brother decided to cooperate with the authorities. According to what I've learned, he gave information about the high-ranking individuals involved in the fraud, which helped the case move forward. Thanks to his cooperation, he got a reduced sentence. Instead of facing years behind bars, he will serve only 1 year and then complete community service. I guess that's good for him, although I don't think it's what he deserves. At least my parents now have many debts because of him, which, in normal circumstances, would be enough to cut him out of their lives. But for my parents, it's surely a bond to reinforce their idea of a united family, as twisted as it is. Update 4. Good news for me. I am already recovering from my accident, and I have an almost normal life, except for a slight discomfort when walking. I was told that it will go away after my rehabilitation. I have an almost normal life. I even went out on a date a few days ago. So I can say that I am recovered. The best thing is that the hospital bill has not been as huge as I imagined. I had little faith in my health insurance, but it worked out well. I don't want to talk about insurance, though, because that seems boring to me. Let's move on to what my parents and my brother have been doing these past months. What I'm going to talk about is that my brother had an accident in prison. Nothing serious. Nothing life or death related. But do you know who has gone to visit him? Yes, my parents. When one of my relatives told me, I could only laugh. It's just so literal. My parents are drowning in debt trying to save my brother, and yet they continue to run after him. At least I hope my parents were checked before entering the prison. That would have been funny to see. Imagine them now, bending over backward, paying out of pocket just to keep their so-called angel in their lives. Update 5. Do you want to hear another update? I guess so, because people have been asking me, especially since it's been a year since my brother was sent to prison. There were more people curious about knowing how things are now than I could have imagined. I even read a comment that said, "Now the prison won't smell the same without your brother's farts when he leaves," which I appreciated because you don't know how much it made me laugh. And yes, my brother has already served his sentence, and now he is free. Although analyzing his life outside and inside prison, I think it might have been better for him to stay there. In prison, he had a roof over his head, food, and access to exercise. Outside, he has nothing, not even our parents. He has nothing because it's been difficult for him to find work. There are no jobs in his field, likely because nobody wants to hire an ex-convict, especially one who has stolen and committed fraud at work. That's the reason he ended up in jail in the first place. To make matters worse, he doesn't want to work in any other type of job because it's not what he's used to. He is now considering his options, or so I've been told by one of our relatives. Apparently, he's thinking about getting a job at a car wash. I joked that he could do the final touch, leaving everything scented before the client receives their car. I think it would be perfect for him, but I doubt he's up for it, as it probably doesn't meet his standards. As for his relationship with my parents, he doesn't have them either, though this is at least by his own decision. He doesn't want to have anything to do with them anymore, partly because he blames them for everything that has happened, as if he bears no responsibility for his own actions. But here's the thing, my parents have always solved his problems for him, so he expected them to do the same again. It's all a matter of expectations. Nothing my parents have done for my brother has been enough for him. Even now, they owe an amount of money that could easily buy a couple of small houses, all just to keep him from spending more time in jail. It hasn't occurred to them that maybe their angel isn't worth all of this effort. It's like buying an air freshener because they love the aroma, but over time, they grow tired of always smelling the same thing. Well, I think that at some point, this should happen to my parents too. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.